Hi, I'm Shezan Renny. I'm the BAME officer of Highgate Branch, which is of Holbourne and St Pancras Labour Party. Thank you for coming to my event. Let's talk about Windrush. I originally decided to hold this event as part of the Windrush Day of Action, expecting it to be a small event. I thought it would be local in our area and that just the local people would come and that would be it. And I'm really pleased that all of you have come. I've never organised an event this big before, or an event before, and I couldn't have done it without the help of all the activists who helped me along the way. As we all know, Windrush is a national scandal in which a group of people who came to the UK legally are now, years later, having their passports confiscated, being illegally deported, and told that they aren't actually welcome here anymore. Now the Tory government have taken this hostile environment and racism to a new level, where even if we were born here, if our parents came from another country, our British citizenship can be revoked. As someone put it, my parents always told me, keep your head down, we don't belong here, they can always send us back. And I used to say, you know what, I'm British, and this is my home. But now I'm not sure anymore. And this is a worrying development. We need to fight it, and yet again, it's aimed at people of colour. We need to challenge this Tory government and their policies that have resulted in this hostile environment. Theresa May and Sajid Javid have proven time and time again that they cannot be trusted. The Labour Party, under the leadership of Jeremy Corbyn, with Diane Abbott, would swiftly and comprehensively reverse and remove this hostile environment cultivated over many years. We need to put our energies into getting a Labour government into power before any more damage is done to our country and its people. Though we're here to talk about Windrush, there are a few local events on today that are particularly relevant to the BAME community. So before we start our event, I'd like to show some solidarity to them. I'd like to send a message of solidarity to the victims of Grenfell. The Grenfell Action Group held a protest today outside Kensington Town Hall at 6:30, calling for social homes, not luxury flats. I'd also like to send a message of solidarity to the BPCC, which is the Bridge Park Community Centre. In the 80s, after the riots, a group of local youth bought some land and they built a leisure centre. Now Brent Council has decided that they're going to sell it to property developers and demolish it and build a hotel, retail space, and houses, luxury houses. So there's a legal battle going on. I think they've got like 5% affordable housing in there or something. There's a legal battle to stop the council from selling properties that are owned by the community, not the council. And their case was in the High Courts today. So that's why today is important as well. Coming back to Windrush. We've got 6 speakers. Then we'll have a Q&A, comment session.
Everyone, can you hear me? Yeah. It's great to be here. Great to be proud to be a Labour Party member. And of course, we need Jeremy to make sure that we can get rid of the hostile environment, or what the Home Office use now, the compliant environment, which still makes the same thing. So I've only got about 6 minutes, so I can't go into all the things I would like to say. I'm going to cover about 4 or 5 key selling points. I think the first point is that the scandal itself has been a long time brewing. I grew up in Wolverhampton. My parents came from Jamaica in the 50s, and they moved to a place called Wolverhampton, still there. My family's still there. And unbeknown to them, when they moved into the constituency, the local MP was Ian Powell. To make matters worse, when I was about 6 years old, they actually opened my junior school. I'm only 25, by the way. If you can remember, when he made his speech, Rivers of Blood speech in 1968, in his speech, he was very clear that there was lots of things he said in his speech, but there was 2 things which is really important that is linked to the scandal and the failure of successive governments to deal with the issue and reinforcing racism in the immigration system. He talked about that we have to get rid of dependents that were coming to Britain during that time period, and secondly, that the black man would have the upper hand over the white man. And obviously this evoked a lot of fear, hate crime in Wolverhampton. There was a massive increase in hate crime, which is no different to what happened after Brexit, with hate crime against all communities. But when he talked about dependence, he was actually talking to someone I've got to know during this scandal, Michael Braithwaite. He was saying that children that came over from the Commonwealth, from the Caribbean, from Africa, from Asia, shouldn't come in the first place. And then 50 years later, the hostile environment is designed because they were undocumented and the way they were treated. So to me, his speech in 1968 was a template for immigration policy for the last 50 years. The only difference is now, what the government, I'm sure Zita will go into more detail around the work the excellent work she's doing around deportation flights, is now we have government policy on repatriation. Something that Enoch Powell dreamt about, something that the National Front wanted, and something that Tommy Robinson thinks is happening. And this is a big issue that we all have to work together, that the whole concept of the hostile environment and the Windrush Scandal, I mean, I've been involved in the issue around fighting for rights for many years, for many decades, and I've been working closely with Ruth Appleton, local activists, with her organisation Frontier, and I learned quite, and I've been involved with Frontier for the last 6-7 years. And Windrush is bad. We all know it's bad. It's abuse of people's human rights, but people who are stuck in the asylum system for decades and decades, and we try and do something in Frontier is to befriend people, give them that support to say, no, you're not alone. And lots of them are suffering from post-traumatic stress and a whole range of challenges before they came, because they might have fled their countries, either economically or politically seek sanctuary, and they're stuck in the system. And then on top of it, they get further racism, discrimination when they're trying to access services, whether it's housing services or the NHS. And one of the commonalities I see in terms of the Windrush Scandal and what's happened now, I've got to know lots of the victims, or I should say survivors, because they have survived. You know, they've been stripped of their incomes, their livelihoods, they've lost their homes. We all know it's been well documented. I'm sure Michael will give his testimony about that. But what I've noticed, because my background, I've worked in health and social care for many years, is I've noticed the very following symptoms of the hostile environment. I call it hostile environmental trauma. So people have lost their liberty, and there's been degradation and humiliation, loss of family life, death, bereavement, anxiety, depression, hypertension, stroke, loss of economic status and earning power, food deprivation, sleep deprivation, isolation and loneliness, deportation for syndrome and fatigue, intergenerational trauma, and issues around identity. And everyone's been affected on different levels. And even though I'm not being directly affected by the Windrush Scandal because I was born here, but I could have come over with my parents, and been in that situation myself. But I've been affected by it because when you hear the story that you're involved as a campaigner and an activist fighting for justice, it's impossible to not be immune from these emotions, these feelings. And that's why I think it's important that all of us need to work together to make sure that this government gets rid of its hostile environment policy. We make sure that the government will be announcing in the next few weeks their compensation scheme. So nearly a year ago, I launched this petition, and on the government website, basically asking for amnesty. And being a former councillor in Hackney, and I have to say, Hackney and other local authorities have now stepped up to the plate and challenging the government on the hostile environment along with austerity. I've been a former councillor. Even though I've stopped being a councillor, people still contact me and say, can you do some casework? I have to remind them, by the way, I'm just an ordinary citizen like you. But anyway, as activists, you still do casework. And I got to know one particular gentleman called Waldo Romeo, who's he's become an activist himself now in terms of being the chair of the Windrush Action Group, which is representing about 300 victims. And when he told me his story, I realised that this hostile environment was targeting particularly Caribbean people and people from Africa as well. Everyone's been affected by hostile environment in terms of Commonwealth citizenship, but for some reason this is another example of how black people have been targeted, no different to stop and search, no different to overrepresentation in the criminal justice system and the mental health system. And this is the final straw in many ways, because when you are told, and you get this letter from the Home Office, that you're going to be threatened with deportation, you're going to lose everything. You're going to lose your family, everything. So when Ewaldo told me about his case, I launched this petition, and I didn't expect the petition to have this impact. Nearly 200,000 people signed the petition, and even though The Guardian had been running stories for a good 8-9 months, particularly Amelia Dillington, the journalist, had been covering case studies, including Michael's and others, there was no traction. There was no real debate in Parliament, apart from when Jeremy Corbyn challenged Theresa May about one particular case, Albert Thompson, who wasn't getting cancer treatment on the NHS, even though he had worked for the NHS, ironically. And she said, I'll sort it out, and she never did. It required the charity Praxis to raise nearly £30,000 through a crowdfunding website, basically, until the scandal broke. Then the government had to concede, and he's getting his treatment now, which is good. But it had to take that campaigning, and he'd been paying, like everyone have been paying, and the majority of the people that's been caught up in the scandal are working class people, working in the public services, working for the NHS, working in the communities, and they've been targeted in a really discriminatory way. It's almost like a double whammy for them. So in terms of the aspect of Windrush, for many years, I've been involved in the historiography of Windrush. I'm sure Les will go into this in his presentation. I've got 1 minute left, okay. I've been campaigning for a Windrush Day, which, as you know, the government has agreed to. We all know why they agreed to that, because of the scandal. Because of, it's not often the government apologises. I think Theresa May has apologised in the last 10 months at least 6 times. And all other governments have apologised. But we all know those apologies are hollow, they're not meaningful, because it's about actions and deeds. And as long as I have these deportation flights, as long as I have this hostile environment in place, their apology is a waste of space and a waste of time. So we have to fight for justice. But one of the key things about Windrush and the history of Windrush, that ship, the Windrush ship, which was voted a few years ago on a government survey as one of the most iconic images of post-war Britain, along with the Mini Cooper and the letterbox. That image is quite powerful. It's not simply about the men and women that came on that ship from the Caribbean. There were Polish people, there were people from Malta on that ship. But the ship itself was formerly known as the Mauna Rosa. That ship used to go up and down the Rhine Valley, where the Third Reich used to have parties. And during the height of the Holocaust, that ship was then used, targeting and getting Jewish people, and taken to Auschwitz. So in many ways, that image of now the Windrush ship and the concept is quite important. It's about celebrating our humanity, our shared experiences, our experience of the journey of migration, which I think is quite important. But the government has used Windrush Day as cover to say we only care about Caribbean people, where it's actually rubbish, because they don't really care about us anyway, and it's about how we all work together. And I think it's really important that the Labour Party, if it's in power, make sure that Windrush Day is for everyone, and not just for a select few people who are in the Parliament thinking that they can have their own projects and be number 10 all the time. The final note, I know this one, the final note is activism does work. So for those of you who've not been activists, I urge you, be active. Because as long as we're not active, then we are colluding with the system. So I urge you, for those people who are thinking about being activists, get involved. It's important that we have a Labour government, but more importantly, being activists on the ground and supporting people who need that. It's about alliance building, it's about networking, it's about sharing, it's about pulling our energies and resources together. I'll stop there.
Lez is a veteran social justice campaigner, internationally respected public speaker and author. His expertise spans across many disciplines, from cultural studies, Black history, community development, race and education, equality and diversity, and he's going to take us on an audio-visual journey on the historical context of Windrush.
Greetings everyone, good evening. Apologies for my tardiness, but it took me half an hour to get from Waterloo Bridge to here because of the roadworks stuff. But so basically this is me, these are some of the books I've put out, or the sole authored books that I've put out. I self-published because, as Steve Biko said, I want to write what I like, so I self-publish. And I have some of my books with me if anyone is interested, fine. So I've been asked to talk about Windrush, and I've actually been delivering talks on Windrush for about 15 years in some way, shape or form. This particular one I do is 2 hours. Yeah, usually it's 2 hours. I've kind of condensed it because seriously, I like to go into some serious depth. I usually do it with Black History Studies. If you don't know who they are, you should check them out because they do great works in the community. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to just, for those who don't know anything about Windrush, I'll give you a little introduction. But there's one specific theme I'm going to cover today, because usually I go into about maybe 6 specific themes. And the theme I want to touch on today in a little bit more depth is, why did my parents' generation come here? I don't know if anyone wants to answer that question before I go into it. Why did they come to the UK? That's usually what people say. They were invited, yes? Got an invitation and they came? Okay. We'll have a discussion. So this is one of the iconic images that Patrick was talking about. Oh yeah, and he's got a really good radio show. I can't remember the name of it. Some cosmic something.
Museum of Grooves.
There you go. Yeah, it's really good. If you get invited on it, go on it. It's a good gig. So one of the things that Patrick said was they stopped in places like Malta. These were supposedly the designated stops, but they stopped in other places. So I'll just run through these. Most of this stuff you can get on the National Archives online. Most of this stuff, that's where I got a lot of it from. So on the 22nd of June 1948, the people disembarked. They actually landed on the 21st of June, and there are mixed stories around why they weren't allowed to disembark on that day, but they actually disembarked on the 22nd of June. So there was collectively an 8,000-mile journey, 492 passengers, and you can find this on the BBC website from 2008. So these are some of the iconic images you see. Normally in the longer presentation, I'll play you a bit of Lord Kitchener, who was my mum, peace be upon her, one of her favourite performers, because she always used to quote him. So if I said something to her, she'd say, "Oh yeah, Kitch used to sing about that. Listen to this tune," because this is what we do. So as I said, I'll just run through this very quickly. These are some of the records the British government reckon they can't find. This is a matter of interest, yeah. When they're saying they don't know who came, when they came, how much they paid, you know, just have to go to the National Archives. It's kind of like in there. But, you know, this is what they do. They say we can't find them, we burned all the documents. Well, clearly they did. They still do that, yes. So, just very quickly, like most gave Jamaica as their last country of residence. It's interesting that they gave Jamaica, because there is this kind of misconception that the majority of the people were just Jamaicans from Jamaica, blah, blah, blah. No, it didn't really work like that again. So you had, you know, last country of residence, you've got Jamaica, you've got Bermuda, you've got England, you've got Trinidad, you've got Mexico, you've got British Guyana, other Caribbean, other non-Caribbean, and people came from Poland and places like that as well on the Windrush to come here. Yeah, it was a multicultural trip in modern language, I suppose. Most of those on board were male. Adults and teenagers, so there were 684 males, 257 females as adults. There were 50 boys and 36 girls who travelled on that ship. So the skills, because this is one of the things that, again, when I do the broader, more in-depth version, we go into some of the skills. And I'll give you some of the Windrush narratives that I have come across anecdotally from either my friends' parents or parents of people that I've been introduced to. So, and that's a bit blurred, but you've got housing domestic 96, mechanics 85, carpenters 54, etc., etc., etc. Now, a friend of mine, her father, came from Montserrat, and he was an English master. He used to teach English in Montserrat. What do you think he did when he came to England? He was an English master. I remember our education in the Caribbean was from where? England. So although they are saying our standards were blah, 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 we were being taught via the British or English educational system. Any takers on what job he ended up doing?
Bus driver.
Bus driver, absolutely. Couldn't get a job doing what he was doing. He ended up driving buses. Okay? So if you ever met this really posh dude who spoke a bit like Prince Charles, this is him. Very, very clever guy, and you actually saw how it destroyed him, that he didn't really get to do what he wanted to do. London was the most popular destination, so you had people in London, Liverpool, Birmingham, Manchester, Plymouth, Bristol, what's that? Birkenhead, Leeds, Colchester, Bolton, Gillingham, all kinds of places and spaces. So these are where people ended up. So the passengers on board the Windrush were invited. Remember I asked you the question and some people said they're invited. Yeah. To come to Britain after World War II to assist with labour shortages. The cost of the passage was £28.10. For you younger ones, that's proper money. Not like this money that you lot have now. The metric. Imagine we have miles, but we have a metric system. Yeah, figured that one out. But there you go. So the cost of passage was £28.10. Many of the passengers had fought for Britain during the war, and I know if you go on Black History Walk site as well as speaking to people like Patrick, they're proper historians. They will give you a good insight into this kind of stuff, especially Tony Warner, who does a lot of good stuff around World War II pilots because his father, I believe, was in the RAF, something like that. So here we have Empire Windrush, From War to Windrush, and you know, several books came out, I think it was after 2008, they had this big so-called Windrush celebrations, commemorations, etc. But why after the war did they come to Britain when we know people from the Caribbean islands were used to and preferred travelling to Central and other parts of America for work? My father used to do that. He used to do farming and stuff. And they would go to places, but never here. So any takers, why do you think they came here? Forget about the invite, because you can get disinvited. Yeah, it's happened to, I only found out what that word meant a few years ago. I was invited to do a talk and then I got something said, well actually no, Dr. Lez, you're being disinvited. Yeah, it happens a lot. For instance, and I do a lot of work around Rastafari because I always say that the people who taught me to reason, I was born in Lewisham, and I was taught to reason by Rastafari, not people who were just supposedly smoking weed and off their heads, people who had knowledge and they taught us to reason. So I was introduced to African history in the first instance when I was about 11, so that would be 1968. And in 1972 I used to go to Moonshot Youth Club where they had a structured black studies course with people like Professor Gus John, remember John LaRose, people like that? They used to furnish the information and the work, whatever it is, whatever we want to call it. So I just want to give you an insight because Rastafari was established in Jamaica by Leonard Percival Howell, Joseph Nathaniel Hibbert, Henry Archibald Dunkley and Robert Hines. And why I put this slide, and again, as I said in the full presentation, go into more detail, these were people who were used to traveling. They traveled across the Caribbean and they traveled across the Americas. So they were used to traveling, okay? And I think it's very important that we appreciate that. So many of them, they left, and most of them came back to Jamaica around 1931, 32, and they kind of like, I don't know, organic, and you know that lovely word, which I can never say. There's a bit of there, that word. In there. But they all kind of gravitated towards each other and became the founders of the various houses or schools or whatever it is of Rasta. So one possible answer can be found in something of major significance that happened on the 7th of October, 1865, in a place called Stony Gut, St. Thomas, Jamaica. Anyone, any takers? Something happened in Stony Gut in Jamaica in 1865. Yeah, but be more specific. That's an easy one, wasn't it? Yeah. So, any takers?
It's not slave revolt, is it?
Well, sort of, yeah.
Strike against
Well, actually, it was Paul Bogle and the Morant Bay Rebellion. And you'll see why I believe it is significant. And it's kind of like an article I've been working on and off, because from my position at University of West London, I have to do stuff. I have to write stuff that, let's say I enjoy writing. But my real stuff that I like writing, yeah, okay. So what happened was there was a rebellion in Morant Bay in Portland in Jamaica. Now why it's significant, sorry, in St. Thomas, it's next to Portland. But why it was significant is because you see it says there, the Maroons were induced to protect the town of Port Antonio and others were promised a bounty to capture Bogle. Now again, I will go in the fuller presentation, I'll go into more of the history of the Maroons, because in popular representations, there's Nanny of the Maroons. You heard of Nanny of the Maroons? Who's heard of Nanny? Well, there wasn't one. No. There's a leeward one and a windward one. So if you go to Portland, you go to Port Antonio, they have a completely different notion of who Nanny was. And a lot of people have suggested, and I kind of believe this, because Nanny comes from Nana. From like, it can be from Ashanti or Fanti tree.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it can be grandmother or grandfather, depending on the context. And my mother, I remember when I used to discuss things like this with my mum, she said to me, loads of the girls were called Nana. There were loads of girls who were called Nana. And people suggest it's after Nanny. Or that was the name, Nana, and became Nanny. But I don't know. I've spoken about it, as I said.
African.
Yeah, absolutely. And we know there are loads of cultural retentions, yes. So the Maroons were instrumental in capturing Bogle while the British went for a scorched earth policy. And you know what that is? In anthropology, we call it like Sweden agriculture. You just burn everything. You burn everything and start again. So what they basically did was Bogle led a rebellion. The British got the Maroons, whichever parts of the Maroons they were, to hunt Bogle, and then they hung him. They hung him on a British ship called HMS Wolverine, 24th of October 1865. Now the reason why for me this is significant is because of this. So you know what this is depicting? Anyone? Haitian Revolution. Now Haiti is very close to Jamaica. I don't know if people realize that. You've seen the film Harder They Come?
Yeah.
One of the places he wanted to go to was Haiti. Next place he wanted to go to was Cuba. That for me is it's significant. And as I said, because of the people I was raised around, they broke that down to us. Some of the symbolism in that film. So black Haitians who lived in Jamaica were deported. After that Morant Bay rebellion, they deported all the Haitians out of Jamaica, because they were saying they were the ones who were whatever it was, getting people to uprise and blah, blah, blah. Similar to what they did with Claudia Jones, kind of in reverse. Because remember Claudia Jones? You all know Claudia Jones? Yeah. Right? Born in Trinidad, when they deported her from America, why did they send her here? Because they said she would have destabilized the whole Caribbean region. Yeah. So what they did was they sent the people from Haiti anywhere. Some ended up in the US, Canada, whatever it was. But they wanted them out of Jamaica. Okay? So, this is where I believe it's significant. Have you heard of the McCarran Water Act?
No.
Who's heard of it? No. Right. So, and I usually read the whole thing out because it's quite, well, no, I usually read about a page of it because it's really interesting the way it's worded. It could actually, you could drop it into some of the stuff they say about immigration, immigrants, threats to civilization. You know the language they use, like they will breed or they will hop on things. You know, the symbolism is always there, the way they, you know, in semiology we call it iconic signs. They can either be visual signs or spoken signs, like a stream. If you hear about something hopping, what do you think of? Rabbits. And what do rabbits do? And what do they usually say about immigrants? Breed like rabbits. So the language.
Swamp.
Yeah, swamp, anything you can think of. I always say to my students, look at any newspaper article, and then I guarantee you will find one from 30 or 40 years ago, and there will be certain key and trigger words that are always in there. Okay. So this particular act, the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1952, blah, 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 enacted the 27th of June 1952, also known as the McCarran Walker Act. So you can look it up, it's online. And bits of it are quite an interesting read. that after slavery was abolished in the United States, supposedly in 1865, American planters imported temporary workers called swallow migrants to harvest crops on an annual basis. So people like my father who did farming and others, this is what they were. They were called swallow migrants. Sorry, slow back. Now these workers, many of them Jamaicans, returned to their countries after harvest. Between 1881 and the beginning of World War I, the United States recruited over 250,000 workers from the Caribbean. 250,000 people. 90,000 of whom were Jamaicans. And some of them worked on the Panama Canal. Okay. I know you get the significance, right? During both World Wars, the United States again recruited Jamaican men for service on various American bases in the region. Now look at what happened to the McLaren Water Act. How many people did I say? And how many from Jamaica? 90,000. After this act was passed, the McLaren Water Act reaffirmed and upheld the quota bill, because this is one of the things he brought in, which discriminated against black immigrants and allowed only 100 Jamaicans into the United States annually. A good insight into that is a book called Rasta and Resistance by Horace Campbell, because he actually breaks down the pressures people were under in places like where my parents came from in Clarendon in Jamaica, because they were darker skinned Jamaicans, they couldn't work in the town in certain visible places. I saw that for myself first time I went to Jamaica, 1985. There was no one of my complexion serving anyone in any bank in Kingston. No one of my complexion. This was 1985 in Jamaica. No one of my complexion was serving anyone at a till in Jamaica. Yeah? They say out of many we are one, but it's usually the lighter or whiter one. Yeah? It's just how it is. I go to Jamaica, they get upset. I say, well, tell me I'm wrong. Ask anyone who used to go to Jamaica, they will tell you. There was no one of my complexion serving anyone. So it got cut to 100 Jamaicans. During this period, larger numbers of Jamaicans migrated to Britain. My father never wanted to come here, and in fact, I did a talk on the Windrush at University of West London in October last year, for, I believe it was for Black History Month. And there were loads of elders from the Windrush generation in there. And there was a guy in there, and when I said to anyone in there, did you want to come in? You know what he said? And I had to commit it to memory. He said, I would have rather have been a lamppost in America than a gentleman in Britain. Because I knew what was waiting for me in Britain. In America, they can always escape back to Jamaica. It's a couple of hours flight. But how are they going to get back? Then you know all about the 5-year myth of return. You know, a lot of Southeast Asians and people from the Caribbean and from the continent speak about the 5-year myth of return. And if you read Stuart Hall's work, he's got a beautiful way he sums it up when he says, I was actually caught up in the illusion that I wanted to go home because people always used to say to me, why don't you go home? Why don't you go back home? Stuart Hall actually really writes, if you read Stuart Hall's stuff, the way he breaks it down. So it was like it was being reinforced that I am going to go somewhere. And then people realized it was so racist they couldn't get rooms. So for instance, where my mother lived in Brockley, the irony was 2 doors away was the house where this white man went to spit in my dad's face. And my dad goes, that's it. So they threw powder and all that and bought a house. I grew up in that house. But these are some of the real stories. And I forgot, 1 minute, all right, we'll close it in 1 minute, right? Here we go. Don't worry about that, we can do this. We can do this quickly. So basically, I actually wanted to close with something. So these are some of what we're used to, you know. I remember all these kind of things. I remember. Some of my students were laughing at me the other day. They goes, you probably remember the war. I said, no, but I remember playing in bomb sites in Forest Hill. We used to play in the bombed out houses. I always say to people, if you walk down the street and you see all the houses are uniform and there are 2 anomalies in the middle, they were bombed during the Second World War. Oh yeah, you can, but when we were kids, they were bombed. Now they've been rebuilt. So I wanted to show you that, but I want to finish with 2 things. So I don't know if you've heard of Joan Annim Addo, based at Goldsmiths College. She published this book, I believe it was in the 90s, I think, early 90s. called Longest Journey, and it's a history of black Lewisham. So she says, this is black history, this is British history, there's no contradiction. And for those of you who aren't familiar with this is Hawkins. You know Hawkins, who Queen Elizabeth I, the White Queen, the Virgin Queen, she sent him out into the Caribbean to take us as Africans and whatever. What is significant about that was when I used to teach at Goldsmiths College, I would take my students past Deptford Town Hall, and he's right in the middle of Deptford Town Hall. A lot of people don't know that. Symbolism outside. It's him, Hawkins, his slave crest is there. Okay. So I just wanted to show you that, because for me there's a real significance there, that the people who, their journeys through the triangular trade began there and ended up there. This is where we ended up. I ended up being born in Lewisham. Very significant borough to what happened. So we're all familiar with all this. Yeah. You know, Rudd quits over Windrush Scandal, then she gets another position and blah, blah, blah. And we can deport first and he appeals. I've always said this, and I will say this on record. That woman is a racist. She just does not like anyone who looks like me. And it's unequivocal. And that's why we're the same age and she looks 50 years older than me. Because she's evil. I think I'm joking. We're in the same. Black don't crack. Sometimes white don't stay tight. But I've always said it. From when she was in whatever positions, you could just tell to me there were just certain things. So, I don't know, whatever. But what I want to show you is this. Now, last year, Mad Professor re-released a record by Sister Audrey. And the album was called English Girl, and I grew up with her. She comes from Lewisham, I grew up with her. And her stuff is very profound. And last year, when all the so-called Windrush Scandal broke, Mad Professor re-released one of her tracks called English Girl. And I just want to quote you what she says in this tune. This tune was released in 1987. The point I always emphasize is the Windrush Scandal is not new news for us in the black community. It's not new news. We know people who are either deported, threatened with deportation, made so-called stateless until they proved that they could belong. I know many people, I grew up with loads of people like that. So, what I basically say is 1987 she released this track. And this is just one extract. She says, my mother and my father too, if only they knew all the promises of work and pay were only part way true. Now 40 years later, we must go back and get some papers. She said this in 1987. 1987, check the track for yourself. This is what she said. So I don't want people to think that this is new. It's not new. It's there, it's been consistent, and I give thanks to Brother Patrick for starting that petition, because what he did was he forced that debate into the wider public arena. Debates that we've been having in alternative spaces, like on records or in dances or in youth centres or youth clubs, and he forced that into the public arena. And how relevant was that? Much less in 2019. Thank you for your time. I hope you...
He lived here in Gospel Oak for 56 years and worked locally. He'll give us a first-hand account of his experience of the hostile environment and its impact on his life and how he fought for his right to remain.
Patrick, well done. Doctor, you taught me something I never knew about, and you enhanced my belief in myself as a person.
I will give thanks, because that's what we should do.
I was born in Trinidad, 1951. My mum and dad were from Barbados, and my dad served in the Second World War. And after the Second World War, he was one of the people that came to Britain to help build the country, and my mother. My dad came here in 1957, worked in the Mount Pleasant Post Office. My mum worked as a seamstress in the NHS making nurses' costumes. Now, they were very proud people, and although they suffered, they never let us know they were suffering, which is something I think about even more now, as I'm at their age. You know, they kept a lot of stuff from us, the sufferings that they had, just to make sure we were all right. You know, and I came over here 61, I went to Toriano Primary School. And there were only 2 black kids in that school, myself and another guy. And as a young guy, I never referenced to my colour. This was not something I never thought about until I was called names and, Sambo and Golly or whatever. And I didn't understand it. I didn't understand what they were trying to tell me, until I, we get together with other guys and they say, well, they're being racist to you. But we didn't call it racism though, because we had to put up with it. We couldn't say it was racist. It was part of what our lives were having to face day by day. After secondary primary school, I went to Holloway School, which was even more of a battle for me as a young man growing up, because in that school there was a very strong racist ideology. May I say that, if that's the right word? We had to stand up for ourselves. And there was some point where my mum and dad were quite liberal. We had friends from all over the place, and they were quite open to give us a chance. So sometimes we would have a school in our house for guys who parents didn't understand. So on a Saturday we meet and we teach ourselves. And, it was a wonderful thing to have to happen. Anyway, I move on to present day. I've worked many jobs in my time up to working in Gospel Oak School, which I started. Well, I've been there for 17 years, and in 2016, my eligibility became threatened by HR resources because we changed HR. I've been working for Camden for 15 years, and because our HR changed to Islington, I became an illegal immigrant. I became illegal, and it devastated my life, and it damaged me as a person. For me, working in the school with kids was one of the greatest joys. And I especially work with kids with behaviour problems and learning difficulties. And I seem to have had a lot of success in that, doing my job. And under 2017, I had a meeting with HR Islington, and they said to me, you cannot work in Gospel Oak School without a biometric card. Now, I had no idea what a biometric card was. I had indefinite leave to stay. And, they got rid of all the old people who had a bit of sense. They brought all these young people in. If they haven't got a biometric card, can't work here. So I got in touch with my union, Unison, and they were baffled as I was, because this hostile environment was a cruel thing for employers. An employer would get himself into serious trouble. 2 years, £2,000 fine and 10 years in prison. I felt sorry for my headmaster because he couldn't help me in any way. He could talk to me, but he couldn't help me. He was more terrified than I was. I got in touch with Hugo, who's sitting here next to me, and he introduced me to JCWI, immigration lawyers. We applied for the biometric card. 6 months after, I got a letter asking me for information from 61 to 73. Now, I'm a hoarder. I keep thinking, I've got all my family's documents at home, passports, birth certificates. I'm the one. And I had all that information. And 3 months after, they sent me the same situation again. So my solicitor asked me, would I go on TV, Michael? This was in April 2017. And I felt like Keanu Reeves in The Matrix, because I could have fallen on the floor. So I thought, well, I can either sink or swim. I'll give it a go. So she asked Simon Israel from Channel 4 and to call me. He called me. He said, we want to come to your house, Mike. We want to come to your environment, because we think, to portray what you're going through, it'd be the best thing to do that. And they came and they filmed it. I was quite emotional at one point, because I thought, well, I'm not going to scream and shout. If they want to send me back to wherever, I'll go. To the point, at my age, I think I'll go. I wouldn't, but I had other thoughts in my head of being alienated. I'd walk around the street not knowing who I was. And I think I knew who I am, but in that big realm of the world we live in now, I'm nobody. I have no standing, I have no worth. My sense of my courage or my being been troubled, so I decided, okay, so they came round to my house and filmed me, went away. And it went out on a Thursday evening at 6:45 if I rightly. Now when I got home that evening, I got a call from a member of the Home Office saying, Michael, we'll issue you with your biometric card right away. No hustle, right away. You know, I didn't know what to think. I had no idea. Are they lying to me? Are they trying? Am I dreaming? It was really like, I can't believe this has happened like this. The process has not seemed right the way it's happened. I've been dragged. I've been tormented. You know, my inner being of me has been soiled. I'm not the same person. Even now, I'm not the same person. I know what I'm like. I'm tender. I still suffer a lot, you know. But, you know, thanks to people around me, family and people who support me, I feel that I can stand up and see the next mile. So, you know, thank you for listening to my story. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael, for sharing your story. Next, we're going to hear from Hugo Pierre. Yeah, just a second. So, Hugo Pierre is a school convener of Unison Camden. He's a Camden Executive Committee member and a chair of Camden Black Workers Group. Hugo has supported and led a number of campaigns in Camden across schools and recently in the NSL traffic warden strikes as well. And he's represented Michael Braithwaite, like you just heard, and when he was targeted by the hostile environment.
Thank you very much, firstly, for inviting me to this meeting. It's quite interesting because I've heard Patrick speak a few times now, and he always mentions that he was Enoch Powell went to his school. Well, I actually had the opposite experience because I had Bishop Trevor Huddleston come to my school. He was the Bishop of Stepney at the time, so some of you may remember him. I mean, he's long dead now, but he was chair of the anti-apartheid movement, and he used to describe to us the situation that blacks in South Africa faced in our school in Hackney, as it was, which is where I was brought up. And I think that set a different tone, perhaps, from the tone that Michael had at that early age. But I wanted to sort of firstly comment, as this is a sort of a Labour Party meeting, I think we perhaps need to set on the record the hostile environment that was developed by this government. In fact, architect was this Prime Minister. Yes, we know there were right-wing Labour Party members who put the term forward first of all, but was actually picked up and run with by this government. It was an absolute racist policy that they decided to do. They deliberately knew what they were doing. They knew that it would catch people in the Windrush generation. They were told it would catch by their legal advice, by civil servants, that would catch people in the Windrush generation who they knew had a legal right to stay, and they still continued pursuing that racist policy. Now, I don't understand how on the news every single day they are not reminded of that. There are Labour politicians that are constantly being reminded about anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, but the Tories are never reminded of the racist policy they have pursued that has led to people like Michael, endangering his health and his livelihood, but people being deported, people dying as a result of a policy, a racist policy that they have pursued. So I think it's important that we put that on the record. There's one thing I always do whenever I speak on the Windrush, actually, and Michael may have heard it a couple of times, but I always pay tribute to Michael, actually, because, yes, it's true I gave him some support, I gave him some advice, I, tried to be a little bit of a moral crutch for him as well, to try and boost his morale through the whole process. But Michael himself has actually taken on a huge task, which was to directly challenge the government live on television, etc. I think that's taken an enormous amount of strength to do that, and in the process was able to publicly give voice to the 50,000 people that have been caught up in this deliberate racist policy by this government, and has actually led to one of the Home Office Minister at that time, Amber Rudd, from being having to resign her seat, led to a bit of a downfall within the government. Of course, they've rejigged, they've blessed her now, they've allowed her back in. She's got another position despite all that, but we should never forget to remind them about that. Now, I just want to say a brief background about what happened, in a sense, within the council, because Michael's correctly said that the decision to dismiss him from his job in the school, although it was at Camden School, was not taken, or he wasn't advised of that by Camden Council. And part of the reason for that was, Michael had another job with Camden Council, part of the reason for that is that when the hostile environment was brought in, a number of cases had started to trickle through internally within the council, within the system. And we, myself, I had a few cases. The branch secretary, George Burnett of Unison at the time, also picked up a few cases. And we were able to win most of those cases by trawling through the immigration legislation, by getting advice from the likes of JCWI, etc., to win those particular cases. And so they became less fearful of, because to be fair, their original fear was the £20,000 fine that was heaped on employers. And so they were moving quickly in these cases, and we were able to slow them down, get them to stop, get them to think about what they were doing, get them to look at the legislation properly. I had a couple of cases where people were dismissed and then people were brought back into work in their job on appeal. So we were able to slow them down. And so when it came to Michael's situation, his job with the council that he had was actually secured. They weren't rushing ahead with that, but his job with the school, because he had different advisors, the head teacher was told, if you don't get rid of him, you're going to get a £20,000 fine, blah, 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 blah. And although we battled away to try and deal with that, we were unsuccessful in that particular school. But then we were able to obviously give Michael the advice that he required. In fact, we were able to get some guarantees for Michael in terms of the appeals process, etc., because he would have had a very limited time to appeal of, I think it's 10 working days. We were able to extend that for about 4 or 5 months, where he could have put in an appeal at any stage once he got his biometric card through. So, we had to do that. Now, I think it brought home to me in particular the fact that immigration and the hostile environment is a trade union issue. It's not an issue that the trade unions can escape from. It's something that they have to be prepared with to deal. And yes, of course, they've got to provide that representation. They've got to be able to get legal advice, and not just legal advice about the immigration aspect of it, but they also need to be able to get advice about the work issues that result from the immigration issues that they face. The question of people being dismissed because of their immigration status is something that is almost automatic, as I say, because employers just look at the level of fine that they had. They want to keep their money in their pockets, as it were, and so they move first without thinking later when they're threatened with this. So it's very important that the trade unions play their role in terms of representation, but also they need to challenge their employers on the policies themselves, how they're doing it. But I think they need to go a step further, because I think Michael has explained to me in detail some of the people that he's come across in terms of casework, and how when people have gone to their MPs, for example, people have then found that actually they end up being in a detention centre or on a deportation list. Not because the MPs have dobbed them in, but because by raising their case with the Home Office, and the Home Office is a complete wild card, that they end up in that situation. And I think that the trade unions need to look at how they can work with lawyers, etc., to provide confidential advice to people when they require it as a whole. And I think also we need to challenge our employers and make sure, as we've done in Camden, but make sure that this hostile environment isn't implemented. I think particularly Labour councils have a role to play in this, in defying what is a racist piece of legislation. They have to say, look, this is something that we can no longer tolerate. We cannot implement things. This piece of legislation that is potentially illegal. So I think Labour councils in particular have a role to play in making sure not only that they not implement the hostile environment, but organise locally to campaign and change it. Thank you very much.
So Connie Sozi is a lawyer, and she's a partner at the reputable Dayton Pierce Glynn law firm. It's one of the most highly regarded civil rights and judicial review litigation firms in the UK. Connie has represented several Windrush migrants in the judicial review and compensation claims, and last month she successfully represented an individual in the first Jamaica flight since the Windrush Scandal.
If it's okay, I'm going to sit down. So I've heard versions of Michael's story time and time again. And for me, I've worked in immigration law for a very, very long time. But it's the first time for me that I've encountered the sort of pain that I have, I guess you've seen today with Michael, the fact that he's saying that he's a grown man and he's broken, and that this has changed him. I have heard that story over the last year, time and time again, from clients. Now, I've been asked to speak about the Windrush compensation as well as the case that I worked on earlier this month. But just for a bit of background, I represent 7 Windrush migrants. All of them, I think, arrived. I think the earliest possibly arrived in 1958, and I think the last one arrived in 1974. And out of those 7, we have one who's got a judicial review case, and that's the one who was was scheduled to be removed on the Windrush, on the charter flight on the 6th of February. Another one is someone who has been here since 1960. I'm going to come back to the charter flight in a second, but the one who arrived in 1960 is arrived on his mother's passport. I think it's just fair to just say a bit about his account. It's been publicised in The Guardian as well, so it's in the public domain. He arrived in 1960 with his mother on her passport. He was 3 years at the time. He has worked in the UK, paid his taxes, been here since then, hasn't left. In 2005, he applied to the Home Office for confirmation of his status because he hadn't obtained another passport since his arrival, and because he didn't need to travel. But he needed to travel back home because his mother, who'd gone back home to Jamaica, had passed on, and he needed to go and see her, went to say goodbye rather. And that's when he started having problems. He'd write to the Home Office and say, can I have confirmation of my status? I came in 1960, this is a copy of my mother's passport. I'm not going to give you the original because I know you'll lose it. But this is my mum's passport. It confirms that I've been here for a very long time. And the Home Office kept silent. He then got his counsellor to write to the Home Office time and time again, asking for confirmation of his status. The Home Office were not at all helpful. He then, similar to you, Michael, had been working for a very long time with a particular employer, who then said, hang on a second, how is it that can you confirm your status? Can you give us your biometric card? He was like, what's that? Then started to, again, ask the Home Office to provide some confirmation of his status in the UK. The Home Office did not do that. His counsellor said, well, this man's going to lose his job. He's been there for 10 years. He's going to lose his job. Come on, confirm. And they didn't confirm. He lost his job. Then he got a series of lawyers to apply relying on Section 1.2 of the 1971 Act, which says that if you're here before If you haven't got right of abode, but you're here, you've had indefinite leave to remain before the 1st of January 1973, then you can remain, and I'm paraphrasing, sorry, rather than reading word for word from the Act itself. So basically what it says is if you've been here prior to the 1st of January 1973, then you have indefinite leave to remain. And that is what he wanted confirmation of. And the Home Office refused to confirm that. They started asking, they asked him for evidence that he'd provided time and time again. In 2018, after, I guess, the Guardian after the Guardian had written about it again and again, he was taken to the Home Office by a Guardian newspaper journalist, and there the Home Office presented him with a document which confirmed that they recognised that he has had indefinite leave to remain since the 1st of January 1973 under Section 1.2. Now so we have a person who's been asking for confirmation, that confirmation from 2005, and because of this whole scandal, then and because the newspapers were there, decided to confirm that it had that status. But of course this man had lost, he couldn't say goodbye to his mother, he'd lost his job, he'd lost all sense of dignity. My client was diagnosed with leukemia in 2014, all sorts of things he's had to deal with. To make matters worse, as part of that process, he asked to be recognised as a British citizen, because he argued that if you had recognised me, you'd recognise my status beforehand, I would have applied for citizenship before, therefore recognise me as a citizen. The Home Office have said no to that because, unfortunately, my client committed a minor offence, I must say, for which he got a suspended sentence. And they've refused him citizenship on grounds that he hasn't proved that he's got good character. And so what we've done is, for that particular case, we're preparing to apply for judicial review because we think that there's been a fettering of the Home Office's discretion, the fact that they haven't looked at their own behaviour and failure to do right by him for the last 13 years when he's been asking, and to penalise him for what is just a minor offence for what we say is his entitlement, citizenship. Now, in relation to the charter flight, the charter flight was on the 6th of February. I was instructed quite late on that case. The client was being represented by another firm of solicitors, so they came to us on the 1st of February and said, this man's been removed, can you assist? And what has happened on this case, and I've been given a minute, but I'm going to not agree to that, because I need to talk about this. What had happened was he had made an application. My client has a deportation order. And he applied to revoke that deportation order. And the normal process for that is you apply to revoke. If the Home Office refuse that application, they're supposed to give you a right of appeal. The Home Office, which I'm assuming that this is because they wanted sufficient number of people on the charter flight, is that they, rather than refuse the application to revoke, they refuse the application on a different immigration rule, which does not automatically give one a right of appeal. Now that's dodgy. And so so my client went to report. He'd been reporting properly, faithfully for the last 5 years. He went to report and was given a decision on that day and detained on that day. So that was the 31st of January, or 30th of January even. On the 31st of January, his lawyer at the time contacted me and said, he's been detained, the revocation decision looks, this decision is dodgy. And I looked at the facts and I saw that he'd arrived in the UK in October 1973, which we are arguing fits squarely in the definition of Windrush migrant that the Home Office has provided in their policy. So I then suggested that they apply under the Windrush scheme, and he put in the application. So ordinarily then, he should not have been on that flight then, if the Home Office had not made a decision on that application. So we made the application under the Windrush scheme. The Home Office did not decide on it, have still not decided on it, but the Home Office is still going to pursue removal. So that was on the, I've got a chronology here. So on the 1st of February, because they hadn't done anything, they were still detaining him, we then said, if you don't release our client and if you don't stop his removal, then we are going to issue judicial review proceedings. That was on the 1st. There's no, and I asked for a response by 4 p.m. on the 4th, which is a Monday. On the 3rd of February, which is a Sunday, because legal aid lawyers work on Sundays, I decided to ask further questions just about the general removal, and the questions were about the Windrush charter flight, and I asked how many people are scheduled to be removed on the charter flight on Wednesday. Number 2, is it possible that any of them are eligible to apply under the Windrush scheme? Number 3, if so, without disclosing any protected data, have any applied to the scheme? Number 4, and if it is possible that some may be eligible to apply and have not applied, what steps is the Secretary of State taking to ensure that they can be examined under the scheme before removal on Wednesday? Number 5, what is the Secretary of State's policy in respect of enforcing deportation action against Windrush migrants? No answer, no surprise. On Monday, 4 p.m, nothing. During the day, I'd called the caseworker to ask what was happening. He said, as far as we're concerned, the removal is still going ahead. And I said, even with the Windrush application, which hasn't been determined? Yes. Okay, fine. Okay. So what we did is we applied for legal aid on the Tuesday, got legal aid quite quickly on the Tuesday, and issued proceedings that evening, an out-of-hours application. And something happened which was extraordinary. Normally what happens is when you issue judicial review proceedings, you don't get to hear from Home Office lawyers until you do that. On this particular case, the Home Office lawyers got in touch with me before proceedings were issued. And what they asked was, what are you going to do? And I said, well, what do you think I'm going to do? I'm going to try to get, my client's removal stopped. And I asked them, so have you heard anything from your client? Should I assume the fact that you're contacting me before we've issued proceedings to mean that your client is going to fight this judicial review? They said, well, we don't take anything from our being instructed at this point. We just want to know what you're doing. And so we issued proceedings, and just as we were making the application on the phone to a judge, the Home Office emailed me and said, well, we're not going to remove your client. Now, the thing that shocks me is this, or maybe it shouldn't shock me because I've done this quite a long time, is that had we not made that application, my client would have gone. Yeah. Despite the fact that he had a Windrush application pending, despite the fact that the Home Office knew that the way that they dealt with the revocation application was wrong, my client would have been removed on that day. So, fortunately he wasn't, but he was still in detention. So I then emailed, after they told us they weren't going to remove, I then emailed and I said, there's no basis on which to continue to detain him, you need to release him. On the 6th, we continued to fight, on the 7th, we were then forced to make another urgent application to the court to say, we need to look at this quite quickly because our client is in detention, there's no need for him to be in detention, the Home Office have not determined the Windrush application, he needs to be out and he was respecting immigration laws beforehand, there's no need for him to be in detention. Again, similar tactic. They waited for us to make the application to the court and then said they're going to release him. And the reason I think that on this occasion, they released him so quickly is because the court made an order after they'd seen our application to say that the Home Office, we had to have a hearing, in which case the Home Office needed to defend their behaviour. And so, because I think that they have nothing to defend, because they have not determined the Windrush application and the way the behaviour was quite bad, they had to release him. So where we are with that case is we're currently waiting for the Windrush application to be determined. I think it's going to be refused on the basis that my client is a criminal, or the basis that my client is a convicted criminal. He is, but in terms of whether, because I remember that Caroline Noakes, the Minister of State for Immigration, did say, quite and Sajid Javid, I think, said quite a number of things about the seriousness of the convictions that those people who are being removed have. And that's debatable in itself, and because we've asked for confirmation of the offences. But my client, yes, he has a conviction. Yes, he served his time. But for the last 9 or 10 years, my client has been, has had no convictions. So we want to, what we're asking the court is for the court to say whether, because at the moment the Home Office's policy on removing people with deportation orders is scanty. We don't know what it is. So if you look at the caseworking or caseworkers' guidance on on convictions or removing people with deportation orders, it's silent on what they will do, especially those people who fit into the Windrush migrant definition. So that's what we're asking the court to do, is to tell us, is to determine the matter. We're going to be arguing, of course, that if someone is a Windrush migrant, given the whole spirit of the Windrush scheme, the fact that it's supposed to, I guess, rectify the wrongs, past wrongs, that our client should be allowed to remain here. This is home, and that should be confirmed in policy. Did I say something about the Windrush compensation scheme? Did I? No. Okay, so the Windrush, maybe because I didn't say anything because there's nothing happening that I know of. So in May, there was a call for evidence. People were invited to, I think it was May, or the deadline was May. People were invited to respond to a number of questions. What went wrong? How did it affect you? What would you like us to do? We told them. In June or July, the consultation begun, and the consultation document told us that the scheme, the compensation scheme, was likely to have a cap or two caps. One was going to be a minimum cap, that if your claim, if you'd faced difficulties, if you'd lost a job, if you'd been detained, if you'd suffered all sorts of things, then you could apply to the scheme, but there was probably going to be a minimum cap. So if your claim was lower than that cap, they didn't specify what the cap was, you couldn't make a claim. And if there was going to be a maximum cap as well, so if let's say if you'd lost a job, I'm not sure what your earnings for the year were, Michael, but I expect they were significant. People have suffered significant losses. So if there's a cap, and let's say the cap is £50,000, does £50,000 cover Michael's loss of earnings and the pain and suffering, and if for those who were detained, and also, so we're waiting to see what they do. So they consulted us. We've told them that it's a nonsense. We've told them what we want. We're waiting, and I think we've been waiting since the 5th of November is when the consultation closed. I don't know much else. So yeah, we're waiting.
A trade unionist, community and human rights campaigner. She's the co-founder and national co-chair of Black Activists Rising Against Caps BARAC UK. She hosted and chaired the Windrush Day of Action on Saturday in Hackney, and was instrumental in the campaign to halt some of the deportations as well.
Thank you. Greetings, everyone. So I want to talk about the flight that went on the 6th and some of the things that happened, because I think it's quite important for people to understand what actually people are having to go through to try and stop. You've heard one account, from Connie, but each time there's been a flight, a mass deportation on a charter flight to Jamaica, I've ended up through the fact that I'm supporting individuals and families living through that trauma with them. And if it was traumatic for me, imagine if it's happening to you or your family, you know, what you're going through. So in 2016, I mean, you know, it stated, oh, the Windrush Scandal just sort of broke out a year ago. It didn't. It's been going on for years and years, as you've already heard from Dr. Lez and others. In 2016, I wrote about the charter flight that went to Jamaica then, and for The Guardian, saying, how can 50 people be snatched? 2 days before the flight went on the 6th, I found myself writing another article for The Guardian, and it felt like deja vu. You know, it's 2 years down the line, and here I am writing about the same thing for the same newspaper. Even the image and the headline looked, you know, almost identical. We shouldn't be here 2 years down the line. All the warnings have been there. The Windrush Scandal, as it's described, has broken out. We know what's happening. Last year, some of us campaigned to say that charter flights should be stopped until there's a full conclusion on all things Windrush. So, you know, the lessons learned, the compensation scheme. My union, the PCS Union, called for an independent public inquiry into the Windrush Scandal last year. And one of the things I wanted to flag up is that we have a petition on the government website, which is actually moving quite slowly. There's only about 3,000 signatures in comparison to what some of the other petitions we've got running, which have 100,000 signatures around individual cases. We do need to have an independent public inquiry. Like, you know, we had to campaign for that on Grenfell. We need proper answers, a thorough investigation. That's not going to solve the problems for individuals now. We need to stop those deportations. So the deportations en masse to Jamaica, to the Caribbean, were stopped. Not to other countries, they were still continuing. And actually, deportations on commercial flights were continuing up until summer last year. The government should never have started them again. So the fact that they started them suddenly in February with very little notice is absolutely atrocious. Then what the government did was to demonise all the people on that flight and label them as criminals. And because of that demonisation, which is effectively like a hate crime against those individuals by the British government, headlines in the Jamaican press were saying there's a plane full of convicts landing. And so what that does is a label. It's already a stigma and a label when you're deported, because it automatically you're deemed to have done something criminal. But actually, throughout the years that this has been happening, people have been criminalised by virtue of their immigration status. So yes, the people that were on this flight on the 6th had at some point committed a crime which they'd been convicted for, and had served their time and been rehabilitated. So if you were a British citizen born in Britain, you don't get punished 3 times, because effectively it's 3 times. So they've been punished by going to prison, so they've done their time. That should be the end of it. They've come out, they're living their life, and you know, they're not doing anything. So why is this happening to them? In addition, actually it's like 4 times punishment. They're having to sign in with the Home Office weekly or fortnightly or monthly, and some of those people are electronically tagged, so they're under a curfew as well for that time. And then they're detained. And what people that I speak to, and I speak to a lot of people that are in detention, will say to me is that this is worse than prison. So if they have served time in prison, you know what you're getting in prison. You know how long you're going to be there. You know when you can get off for good behaviour. You know how long your sentence is. You don't in detention. You're there indefinitely. You don't know how long you're going to be there. And then to find out that in the middle of the night you could just be grabbed with sort of a week turnaround, you could be deported. So one of the things I want to flag up is that if you know anybody or anybody's talking to you who feels that they may be possibly impacted by this, they need to get legal representation and support. And we have sort of a team of lawyers, you know, Patrick, Connie, myself and others work together in an umbrella of organisations which is called BAME Lawyers for Justice, which is a group of race equality organisations, the Society of Black Lawyers, Asian Lawyers and Muslim Lawyers Associations, who have been working together actually around justice and race issues for a number of years, who've now been joined by others, and particularly groups across the UK that are campaigning on Windrush issues. So we have teams of lawyers, we have access to lawyers. People shouldn't just think it's going to go away and put their head down, because it won't. And it could be as fast as a fortnight that you find yourself snatched, in detention and booked on a flight to go. And once you're out of country, it's very, very difficult to come back. When I speak to people that have been deported previous years, trying to come back is a real struggle. And not only that, they're stigmatised. They can't get work. They're dependent on charities to survive. They're going through horrendous experience, and they're isolated and ostracised, demonised, labelled and separated from their families. So, you know, most people, the people that were originally booked on the flight on the 6th, they were to be separated from 45 children, actually no, 51 children in total, and those are the children we know about. So imagine 51 children were going to be without a parent if those people went on that flight. And at the time of the flight coming about, I was supporting or leading a campaign for somebody who wasn't of the Windrush generation, and I wanted to quickly flag up that actually, when we're talking about Windrush injustice, we really need to include all of the families of those people, because the subsequent generations who are being deported because of the fact that they've joined a family member, they wouldn't be here if it wasn't for all the things that Les talked about at the beginning. They wouldn't have come to join family. So they are also being demonised. And Train Morgan was one of the people booked on that flight, and I can see my 1 minute, and I'm going to try and not abuse it as much as my time as much as Connie, but I do want to, I have been asked to talk about some of the things from the Windrush Day of Action, but I do want to highlight 2 cases of people that were on this flight. So at 12 midnight, I got a call saying somebody's trying to slit their wrists in one of the detention centres who's about to be deported, a 22-year-old young man. 999 was called, and 999 said, we can't come out, we don't have any jurisdiction in there, so we can't come. So instead of this young man being taken to hospital, he was put on the bus to be taken to be deported out of Birmingham Airport, even though he'd slit his wrists. In fact, a nurse said to him the next day, well, they should have just put plasters on you and sent you out of the country. So this is the kind of thing people are facing. So I had to then track down at midnight, now going on for 1 a.m, the Jamaican High Commissioner. And some of us in our BAME lawyers group, several of us in fact, were up the entire night trying to get people off this flight and trying to make interventions with immigration enforcement commands. And to call their emergency number, you can't call them. You have to do a written submission. So I'm sitting there because the lawyers are trying to do, you know, all sorts of legal actions and injunctions in the middle of the night and wake up judges. And I'm sitting there having to draft a detailed email to immigration enforcement about this particular case before they then would respond and talk to me on the phone. They wouldn't speak and give proper details to myself or the Jamaican High Commissioner because of GDPR. So we had to track down the lawyer for that particular person to get authority to speak to them. By this time, obviously, you know, this thing is on its way. And at the same time, Train Morgan, who's a Commonwealth soldier, who served in the British Army and who was discharged early. He would have been entitled to be a British citizen after he served 5 years. He was discharged early because of PTSD, because of his direct experience serving in the British Army, and then he was refused. We got an injunction for him the afternoon before, around 5:30 p.m. there was an injunction taking him off that flight. 2 a.m. I get a message from his girlfriend saying, they've got him. And I'm like, what do you mean they've got him? So just to make you aware of how things work, if you have a criminal conviction, 6 guards charge into your cell and wake you up, all armed guards, wake you up very, very aggressively. If you haven't got a criminal conviction, you know, they'll tap you on the shoulder and say, we're off now, nicely. So you see that demonisation just because of the fact you've had a criminal record. So he was taken, grabbed, and we're having to talk to his minder, because now he hasn't got a phone, who he's cuffed to say he shouldn't be on this flight. And this man is saying to us, Now, there's several people in that position who said they shouldn't be on this flight, and there's all sorts of actions, but I can't do anything until I get authority. So they took Twain to the flight. He was the final person. So bear in mind, we've got an injunction that in the afternoon before. When Twain's lawyers started to make an intervention to the courts to say what's going on, they faxed through at 2 in the morning, mind, a response to a previous judicial review application to say, no, he's got to be deported, undoing the one from the night before. So in the middle of the night, they had to do another injunction. Twain was the last person to be put on the flight because they knew he's not supposed to be on that flight. He was, and what happens to people is they are chained up. So you talk about enslavement and what happened to our people when they were enslaved and bought on those boats. You're chained around the waist, your legs are strapped in, and you are cuffed to 2 security guards on either side. And if you make a fuss, you will be quietened down for the rest of that flight. Let's put it that way. I've seen that happen to people. So this is the experience. And then he got a tap to say, oh, we're taking you off. So imagine the trauma. So going back to the compensation, and how do you measure compensation? How do you measure the compensation for somebody who's gone through all of that trauma? That could give you a heart attack if you had, a heart condition going through that. Not to mention what the families are going through, what the children are going through, thinking your loved one is fine, and then they're going through all of this. And on top of that, Sajid Javid, as has been mentioned, went into Parliament and stated these are all people that are guilty of very, very severe and serious crimes. Murder and rape are the things he said. There was one murderer, one person convicted of rape on that flight. In the end, 29 went. Some people did applications for asylum on the way to the airport to say it wasn't safe, so they got taken off. That doesn't mean to say they're safe, because they could easily be put on a commercial flight 2 days later or another charter flight subsequently. But these are the kind of experiences people are having to go through when they're put onto these flights. So how you measure being ostracised and separated from your family for 10 years because you were deported to Jamaica or wherever it was that you were deported to, how you measure your children growing up without a parent, how you measure all of those things financially for compensation, I don't see how you can put any limit or cap on it, because that trauma can't be measured. Yeah, at the end of the day, it can't be measured. So I think that the British government, through Sajid Javid, actually did something really, really horrendous in terms of stating that, because that meant when that plane landed, the young people that were on there, or of all ages that were on there, but one particular young man, Shezan Brown, whose family I've been supporting, he did a driving offence. So from what we know, isn't it, that was the least offence of all the offences we know about. So he did a driving offence, a dangerous driving offence. He was a young boy, 20, when he did it. He served his time in prison. He's rehabilitated. He's complied with absolutely everything required of him in terms of probation, signing in, and he's been demonised as this hardened criminal. And his dad, stepmother, and his siblings are all in the UK, living in Oxford, and he's just been sent to somewhere that he knows nothing about, with no family, nobody, and he's a young boy, and it's really terrifying and scary and depressing for him. It is for everybody that's going through that. You've heard Michael talk about how it impacts on you. You haven't been deported, so imagine if you have, what you're going through. So the group of us that I mentioned have come together to try and organise, because we think that we need a mass mobilisation of people, because look, all of these different things are going on. We're campaigning here, we're trying to get people off flights there. We've got lawyers working with activists and campaigners and doing all sorts of things to try and stop these deportations, to get justice. Individuals having to give their lives up, like yourself, and actually become an activist overnight, which was not obviously in your plan of things to do in your life. And so we think that we need a mass mobilisation. So on Saturday, we had our first Windrush Day of Action, which actually we used as a planning event. It was originally going to be the day of action, and we realised we need more time, we need to build, we need more mobilisation. And so we did something actually quite historic, that we had simultaneous events in several cities across the UK, Liverpool, Manchester, Birmingham, Nottingham and London. We had different activities going on. London, we had a 400-strong meeting, and we put some proposals of things that we think we could be doing in terms of a mass mobilisation in the build-up to a big day of action, but also on a day of action. And the preferred day, which not everybody agrees with, but it's the day that the majority at those meetings have said they want to take the big day of action, is the 22nd of June, which is Windrush Day. And for the very fact that it is supposed to be a celebratory day and this is still happening to our communities, that's why that day has been highlighted. But we want to do a lobby of Parliament. We want to do some civil disobedience. We're looking at things like, roadblocks and banner drops on bridges, something that will have a real impact. But what we need is for people to be involved, to sign up to what we're doing. And as has been mentioned already, if you're in a CLP, you're in a trades council, or you're in a trade union, take action yourself. Speak to your members, offer support and surgeries. Link up with us. We need practical support. Symbolic solidarity is fantastic. Getting messages of support is wonderful. But in reality, things cost money. Meeting rooms cost money. Printed leaflets cost money. Coaches cost money. So we need everybody to go back to their own community groups, their churches, their mosques, their trade unions, their CLPs, whatever it is, and actually say, yes, we're going to sign up to this campaign and we are going to give some practical support, and this is what we can offer, this is what we can do. And it might be a meeting room, it might be that you sponsor some refreshments, it might be that you put on a coach. It doesn't matter how small or how big it is, every little action helps. Because if we don't have a mass mobilisation that really brings the country to a standstill, they're not going to listen to us. Because we've seen, the hostile environment has been going on since way before 2012, but 2012 with the Immigration Act is the thing that allowed what's happening now to people to happen. And let's not forget that they're stopping people coming into the country as well as trying to get people out. And that's been used to mask the real reason for austerity and cuts and poverty in the UK, to try and label somebody else and scapegoat other people, whether it's us, and our parents that came from the Caribbean, whether it's people fleeing climate change, persecution, poverty, that's trying to get into the country to a place of safety, not forgetting that Britain not only, was involved in enslaving people, illegally taking people, torturing people, their part in empire. Actually, Western countries are the worst perpetrators of climate change, and the people that are fleeing climate change and poverty are from countries where the UK has historically, and other Western countries, pillaged the resources of those countries. So I think we need to look at the context of all of that, because it's all part of the same campaign. So if you're campaigning on climate change, or you're an anti-austerity campaigner, anti-racism, race equality, because you can't just be against racism, you've got to be for race equality. And to be for race equality, you've got to actually get up and do something, not just say this is terrible. The reason there's a far right rising across Europe is because of the conditions that we have through the hostile environment and government policies, which allow them to thrive, which actually create division between communities. So we can't allow that division to happen. Yeah, because if it's us today, it's going to be another community tomorrow. So we need to stand together, we need to step up, we need to speak out, and we need to give practical solidarity. And I'm sorry, I did go over probably as much as Connie.
Sam?
It is a comment rather than a question. But I want to thank Dr. Henry for one particular thing, emphasizing on the history. Because we must describe ourselves and we must describe our history. That's when you can understand us, and that's when we understand our identity as black people. International, in the Caribbean, in Africa and in America, we must be able to identify our history, our struggle, our suffering, and know exactly who we are, what we are as identity of black man to the core, and know that we are Africans to the core, and we must articulate Africanism or Ubuntuism as separate completely from Eurocentrism, and say, look, we refuse to be defined. We define ourselves. Thanks for that.
I know it's really one of the interesting things around the scandal is it was the first time ever that the British public understood why we came, how we contributed, and that led to a real massive public support for the Windrush people. Hearing Michael's stories, other stories, people realise that we are British. And I think one of the key issues is, that's why I've been campaigning for Windrush Day. And I know there's... Okay. And I know that there's plans to have a day of action on Windrush Day. I disagree with that, because Windrush is not a national curriculum. Windrush is not acknowledged, or the history of migration is not part of the national narrative. People still talk about... if you go outside of Britain when you're on holiday or whatever, people see Britain as either Bridesheads Revisited or EastEnders. We're not here. We're completely invisible, and we have to put a marker down that we've contributed. We are contributing, but also fighting for injustice as well. And the whole idea of trying to, it's important, because if we don't pass on the history, then there'll be future Theresa Mays who'll do the same thing again. So we have to educate people in the schools, the media. I mean, with Andrew Lee passing away quite recently, who I knew quite well, people now reflect, oh yeah, she was a great writer. This is smart. Yeah. Well, she was here. She could have done more stuff. There's other people doing stuff, writers. The work of Lez, who's been kicked in and out of academia because he's telling the truth about history. Academia actually has more to play around the historiography of Windrush, and it's not doing enough. And there's not enough black historians. We're not being given the permission and the resources to tell our story. We need to change that.
Yeah. So when you're talking about the BAME lawyers, I wanted to find out if there was work being done around how the immigration laws are exempted from equality laws. So when you look at the equality law, there's like an exemption around immigration, and I just wondered if there was any movement to challenge that.
So the first question was whether there's any movement on, challenging the fact that immigration laws are exempt from race equality legislation. There might be, but I'm not aware of it. The way I'm running, I've got a case, a Windrush case, which we've issued in the county court, and one of the issues that we're raising is that there was a failure by, I guess, various state agencies. Number one, the Home Office. Number two, DWP. Number three, the local authority, to provide proper services for immigration, for Windrush migrants. And the reason why they failed to provide those services was possibly because of my client's race, and so, I mean, it's an interesting argument. I'm not sure how far it will go, but I think there's something to be said about how each of the, I mean, let's say if Michael, you were white, yes, had been born in the UK or had arrived in the UK in 1957, I wonder whether your employer would have asked you for a biometric residence permit. I don't believe that they would have.
I don't believe so either. But in the past, because of the name Braithwaite, I've applied for jobs, and when I've got to the actual job,
Been a shock.
they told no, sorry, the job's gone. You know, when they see my colour, but that's what we have to put up with.
Yes. So yes, I guess first, what the argument that we're making is that given that we've got on this particular case a person who has been in the UK working since the 1970s, paying their taxes, and is on a pension because they've been paying NI contributions for years, have been working legally, that the only reason that they would have been asked to produce biometric residence cards or permits was because they were black, and there's therefore a disparity in the way they were treated as compared to someone who's white, or maybe even someone from Australia or New Zealand, some other Commonwealth countries where with I guess white nationals. And so that's how we're running that in relation to the Windrush issue. So yeah, so I don't really know about your the question you've asked. I'm not saying that there shouldn't be. I think there should be possibly something on this. There's probably something to do, maybe JCWI. I think possibly in relation to GDPR and I think disclosure of documents to immigrants. There's probably something about this, but I am not, I guess, the authority on that.
So, answering the first question, another Hackney member, welcome. So, actually, in terms of the hostile immigration environment, there was no equality impact assessment done on the public sector equality duty. The National Audit Office did a damning report on the handling of the scandal by the Home Office, and they used the word there was no duty of care. That's the first thing. The second thing is that if you look at the history of immigration acts and the history of race relations law and policy, there's been a conflation of both together. So when there's been the 1965 63 Act, then they added 65 Race Relations Act. So every couple of years you have a tough immigration stance, and then you have partial race equality legislation. And that has always been the case for the last 50, 60 years. And unfortunately, Labour, even though I'm proud to be a member of the Labour Party, has been involved in implementing the most draconian immigration legislation against people from the Caribbean, from Africa, from India, etc. As well as doing the best legislation around race equality. It's a contradiction that we need to sort out. We really need to. So, but at the same time, if you look at immigration policy and immigration law, it's always favoured people from the Dominions, people from Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and it's always worked against people who are black and brown, because it's institutionally racist. That's the bottom line. So you can't make an exception, say, oh, let's do something nice around immigration, because it's racist in the first place. And that's part of the problem. And that's why we have to campaign to make sure that there is equality, and we get rid of some of the racist historical legislation which has divided families together, have deported people as well. In terms of the Jamaican government and the prison project, which I think, Sonia, you raised, David Cameron a couple of years ago went to Jamaica and had the audacity to go on the Virgin flight, go to Jamaica, do a public address in the Jamaican Parliament and say, I'm going to give you a prison. He was told to go back, and he did. But we don't know if money's been transferred over from the Foreign Commonwealth Office to Jamaican government or any country. We know for a fact that particularly countries like Ghana and other countries have refused to accept these deportations and anything else. I suspect it's hidden in trade or aid. So we couldn't exactly say it's £20,000 per head or £35 a head. I had a meeting with the Jamaican High Commissioner recently, and I asked him directly, are you getting the money? And he said it's all fictitious stories that have been put about around social media. So we don't really know. There's Desmond Jeggo, who runs an organisation called Defend Windrush, has written directly to Jamaican Prime Minister Andrew Holness asking these questions. He was in Jamaica just recently, just came back a few days ago, and he's still waiting for an answer. Maybe we have to do a freedom of information request, maybe to the Foreign Commonwealth, and we can find out.
But it actually impacts on our young people, and that's what I keep reminding us, that mum and dad, grandparents in hostile environments, that breeds the fear that our young people are walking the streets with. Carry knives because they want to kill each other. They carry knives because they're afraid of each other. Yeah. They're afraid of the streets and the places that they work in. And we're also struggling under austerity. That impacts again on our children. And those are the services that are being cut, are the services that our young people need to keep them safe, to make them feel part of the system, and that they should be able to benefit from.
I want to thank very much for the organisers, and particularly you as being chair.
Yeah.